Okay. Some of you probably have been waiting to ask me this for quite a while, and I appreciate your patience. I do understand. Many of you probably don't care all that much about how fancy a new system would be and what kind of technology will be involved here, whether it is AI or is it machine learning or is it operation research. We don't care about any of that. As a user of whatever platform you propose here, tell me, what do I expect and what could I as a user get out of it? I think that's a very good question. And in this video, we are going to try to address them one user category at a time. And we will begin with the procurement part of the supply chain management. As we mentioned earlier, 5PL is going to be a lot more, I guess, much deeper integrated into the procurement functions as compared to, say, 4PL. And here's why. I did mention earlier that when all the procurement decisions are made without the consultation with and the consensus from the project logistic management function, the result of that often could include things such as the pickup or the ship date scattered all over, and the delivery ports could be also scattered all over, which will become such a challenge for the logistic plan. Whereas you could have, if the opportunity was granted, you could have actually consolidate some of the shipment. Obviously, you can't always consolidate all of them, and many project manager, for whatever reason or concern, they don't really care if they could consolidate. But if you're the guy working on the logistics for a project, I'm sure you have a very good reason to convince the project manager that you do want to consolidate, given all the justifications that you could make it happen and make your compelling case to make the business sense. So anyway, back to the point, the procurement decisions should be made with the logistic considerations all accounted for. And that's the part the 5PL should come in and try to contribute at the point from pre-feed to the feed stage procurement decisions. So where and how 5PL would come in and make a difference? Well, let's just picture this. Let's say you are going to come up with a list of the vendors to be considered for the capital equipment. Obviously, a bunch of engineers on the team already are in place, and they have their very good reason to line up the rationales to consider certain vendors over others for particular technology, the latest technology development that is being licensed to certain EPC as versus other. And of course, that is to be commercially associated with the development cost reduction too. And of course, everything all considered in that and all that. So here comes the 5PL. Say, all right, I already checked out where physically the fabricators of the candidates to be considered, where are they located? And where are the most commonly accepted international seaports where the steamship lines more likely to have their service calls either regularly or dedicate charter tonnage, whatever the case may be, but nonetheless commonly accepted as the international seaports. And going from there, they would have a somewhat plan, basically to interconnect between the load port and the fabricator's place, and calculate all these connections in timing and the logistic infrastructure, and try to work out a consolidating scenario between certain ports, and to come up with the recommended ship dates for the purchasing manager or procurement manager to try to negotiate with the fabricator later to achieve certain ship dates, if it's all viable, without adding significant cost to the procurement. That's just one of it. One of these contributions that 5PO should be accounted for. And then also adding to that, the 5PO could also provide the plan, the initial plan of the logistics scenarios of those capital equipments, as they see how would that play out, by evaluating the risks and to make assessment on the risk along with the viable countermeasures to mitigate such risks, by first looking at the logistic infrastructure all the way from the fabricator's place to the main port, and then as the load port, and then the discharge port, and then from there going all the way to the laydown yard or the project site, whichever. And of course, with that logistic infrastructure review, the risks are identified and the countermeasures are assessed along with the viable resources to support such countermeasures, and that becomes the plan. So with that plan, the 5PO could suggest to the procurement manager of the project what kind of delivery term should be negotiated. And that is something today, I believe, at most owner-operators, it is something nobody's doing today. And then adding on top of these two things, the 5PO could also contribute more by doing what? You have the plan and you know what you're going to negotiate or try to be placed in your negotiation strategy, but you also need to have the certain terms actually worked out. And this part may not have anything to do with the mathematics of the optimizations, but it does have a lot to do with the contract. And we do know this. Let me give you two separate examples, right? The first one will be logistic related. In most cases, for the project inbound material logistic operation management, we don't really see much of a container regular shipments here, but more likely would be what we call heavy lift breakbulk ships, whether some were regular service or private charter. Either way, it will be most likely the heavy lift breakbulk ships. And at least in the USA, the liner services which basically offer the same service, to the general public, with the tariff typically filed with FMC, which is basically colorblind federal agency of United States government, basically governing the trade, at least either load port or discharge port located in the U.S. Nevertheless, the trade is associated with U.S. sea trade. However, the breakbulk ships typically are operated, not always, but a big proportion operate under what they call private contract, which is charter party. And that is, in most cases, exempted by the big antitrust concept in the US. So when you are dealing with the contracts here, or the agreements, whichever the EFA or COA, whichever, most likely you are looking at the type of maritime contracts that is totally different from those container service agreement or that kind of contract, because basically it's all different, right? By experience, I know many owner operators, their in-house logistician, or let's say, the so-called expert they brought from external resources, they just keep piling on the contract. So when you read those contracts, they're so thick, but probably 1/3 of those terms and clauses and a lot of legal languages basically have absolutely nothing to do with the project inbound material logistic cases at all. Apparently they borrowed from the midstream, downstream, those container contracts, and lots of language from there. So a lot of people probably think, hey, you know what, just leave them there, it may not hurt. Well, I disagree. Why? Because a lot of it actually could hurt if you one day find someone and use that in court in a litigation situation, and point to the maritime judge, which in the United States is all federal. There's no state jurisdiction over maritime, and the lawyer on the other side would say, Your Honor, look at this contract. Do you believe this is someone actually know what they're doing? I mean, look at this term, look at this language. It doesn't even apply. So you tell me again that doesn't hurt. I believe it could when it actually comes to that. I hope not. So anyway, that's just the one case in point that 5PL does not always necessarily limit itself to the optimization model analysis. And this is the part 5PL could actually work to help with the machine learning, and of course the legal expertise, the technicality, legality, in certain scope of the, in this case, maritime laws and regulations and all that kind of expertise. And here's another example, also as the case in point, which is IT related, right? So we do know that at every owner operator, there's always at least two separate outfits for IT related matters. One is more on the management and maintenance of the internal network, and of course the support of the approved third-party infrastructures, whereas the other is more on the front line to deal with the project management and to provide the support. And they are the one to deal with the business application requirement and to define them and to bridge them. Obviously, whatever project or at the corporate level becomes the project of the IT outfit of the company, then the corporate will pay for it. Otherwise, the project management will pay for it. And because of this finance practice, the financial practice or financial management practice, the situation always present itself in such a dilemma, let's say. When you are placed on a project to negotiate contract for the IT related hardware, firmware, software, system, everything, when you're supposed to negotiate all that, what are you looking at? First of all, you go back to the so-called EFA, right? The long-term agreement set at the corporate level or the category management level. And then you look at all those agreement, the big names, big corporate suppliers. They don't really have a whole lot of things to choose from. So if you contact them, hey, guys, we got money here, and you don't tell them how much you have, but you say, we got money here, we need this and that, and I realize you don't have the off shelf, so can you develop that for us? Well, then the big guy tell you, this is what typically they would say, oh yeah, we would love to do it for you. But first of all, to justify a particular R&D, we've got to have the order of this and that much amount to justify that effort, right? And pretty much what you're describing to us sounds like a very customized. First, we'll have to look at, do we have the engineering capacity to actually do this for you, and how much time if we actually put your request on the line and look at where your place would be. We'll tell you how long or how soon it would come up to the timing that we could actually execute such a project. And we're not even talking about money, right? And then when you look at that, there's no project management, regardless the cost. Nobody can wait. So you're the guy negotiating IT contract on the project level. What do? Typically, because you can't go with the big names, they don't have the products. So you go out there, try to shop, right? For whoever the guys who are actually very good at certain niche area, and they have earned a good name for themselves. But here's a problem or concern, a very valid concern, that is, you don't really want to have a 10 or 5 or 8 or whatever number of IT vendors. Each one has very great product and service, but who's going to put them together? When something happens, what's going to happen is going to be that finger point scenario again. Like party A says, oh, you know what? My system working really good, or my subsystem is a system to them, but overall it's a subsystem. I don't know where and what happened, but basically I don't believe we're the one at fault here. And then the other guys say pretty much same thing. And they all try to convince you that it's the other guy actually messed it up. So you can't go with the big guys on the portfolio set up by the category management. And there's some very good smaller guys, and they got very good products and services. And you can't really find a party to put them all together. So who's going to be responsible for whatever, let's say, your purchasing decision come up and you want to buy, right? So this is a very big problem. And that's where 5PL could actually come up with the recommendations. How would 5PL be able to help? Well, because they have a lot of research, big data, whatever else, and a lot in machine learning, a lot of things. Basically, they will give you the not only just a nice strategy, but they would come up with the names of the niche subcategory vendors and likely the party to integrate and provide the overall support for all this third-party stuff. So that is something very technical on the IT side, but also technical on the commercial side. And that I know a lot of owner-operator today, they have the, I guess, the individuals doing all this procurement on the IT thing, and they don't really have very up-to-date IT knowledge. And then I actually looked at some, let's say, contract, right? Placed on some third-party, very small vendors who provided some third-party website-based solutions for supply chain management transparency. So the first problem I had when I look at such a contract, there is absolutely nothing like service level agreement, right? So what are you holding the third-party vendor accountable? There's almost nothing there. Nothing is defined. So apparently whoever drafted this contract for one of the biggest owner-operator apparently had no idea what the IT procurement should be. That's the first problem I had. And then in my own background, having been a system integrator, architect for infrastructure, I am, I guess, intimately acquainted with all the costs associated with such a project. So when I look at the value of the contract, I do understand, because if you really want to go all the way professional on such an IT contract, what's going to happen is nobody want to sign such a contract with you, not for the contract value, which is if I am the guy to take this job, I would definitely not settle for the contract value that is agreed upon in that agreement or contract. Why? Because basically the small third-party vendor would have to cut lots of corners to be able to meet with that budget, and yet to be able to deliver what is the application service functions required and so defined by the owner-operator. In other words, if you give me this contract at the value that was agreed upon, I'm not sure I can do it the right way. So what does that mean? That means you're opening up to a lot of risks, because when people cut corners, they have to, because otherwise they can't survive. So there's your problem, right? Because your project manager, I don't know, you can call them cheap, but when it comes to this, a couple of $1 million, they think it's already a lot of money. Of course, they're not IT guys. They don't know what's involved to develop some customized, basically design something and deliver just based exactly on your need, custom tailored. In America, that costs a lot of money, but the project managers don't know. They think a couple of $1 million, it's a lot of money. It is, but also they need it like yesterday. So with all this put up, when you become the guy or the lady to handle such a negotiation, basically it is a mission impossible. So how do you solve this? I think where the 5PL could first start with the category management of IT procurement, right? So constantly looking for the type of business applications that is understood very likely for the capital project of this company. So that is basically a mid to long-term plan. So with that plan, if the 5PO understand the business application and the vendor sourcing would go accordingly, not just the niche category or subcategory vendor, but also the integrator that would actually carry the entire responsibility of support. When you have that kind of 5PO portfolio set up and proactively maintained by constant checking, then at the project level, the guy, the lady who is supposed to negotiate a contract could have a lot to work with. Nevertheless, this is where I personally believe if you are the project manager or the project procurement manager or the project IT procurement specialist or the project logistics service procurement specialist or the project logistician, you will love this stuff that is to be offered by 5PO. Yes, I am really convinced there.